Buongiorno, buon pomeriggio, e buonasera, Lazio world. Welcome to our season recap episode. This a very special one because Caleb, we are celebrating our 50th episode together here at Lazio World. It's been an incredible ride. Caleb, some thoughts from you 50 episodes in.
Yeah, man, like it's been a great journey. It's been really fun. We've learned a lot, I think, throughout the process. It's been really a unique first season we've been covering with all the changes and stuff. And but it's been a lot of fun, regardless. Despite the results, it's something that I always look forward to every single week. So yeah, man, it's been real fun. And hopefully the audience feels the same.
Yeah, Lazio has never failed to give us something to talk about. And in a season of chaos, highs and lows, it definitely gives us something to look forward to. Whether we are needing this as therapy or just celebrating together. It's been a lot of fun. Looking forward to many more episodes, and want to hear from our listeners and our viewers on what they hope to see. We've got a little bit of a stretch here without matches, and the core of our podcast has been instant reactions, but we want to be able to do some more and do things differently, particularly in this off season, and we will. But first, before we close the books on this season, we want to recap it with you all, and we've got a fun one. So I want to jump into this. And Caleb, what we're gonna do first is we're gonna show everybody what damn fools we are. We started the season with some predictions, and we're going to share those predictions, and we're obviously going to take a look at where we landed and essentially ascribe a winner and a loser between you and I, and who is closer to reality here. So let's jump into this thing. Our very first prediction came in our goal prediction.
Mm-hmm.
So I had predicted going into this season that our leading goal scorer would be Ciro Immobile. Caleb, you also had Ciro.
I did, yeah.
And look, let's round of applause because we both got that one right. Ciro ended the season as our goal leader. Now, a little bit of a stipulation there, and that we probably fell pretty short of what we had both predicted on goal tallies. So, in terms of breaking this tiebreaker, since we both had Ciro, we're gonna take a look at where our guesses were. Now, I had Ciro Immobile with 20 goals, and Caleb, you had him with 24.
Jeez.
He ended with 7 Serie A goals and 11 in all competitions. So in this category, I've got to take it by tiebreaker there. It was a tough season, and kind of crazy that somehow Ciro still ended up leading the team in goals. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I think all of us expected for Ciro to come back kicking again, out of a bit of a slower year. And I mean, I think a lot of that has to do with some of the early season woes of chance creation that we had, even going into the later parts of the season. I think every attacker has been affected, right? Ciro, the striker, will be the most of them all. Yet he found a way to get some goals in games, and it's yeah, that's all I can say.
Yeah. Well, let's move on. Our next category was predicting assists. So our assist leaders, I had Luis Alberto as our assist leader. I had predicted an assist tally of 10. Caleb, you had Kamada with 11. Care to guess who finished tops in assist?
Felipe, my
guess. It was Alberto.
Really?
Alberto had 7 Serie A assists, 10 in all competitions. So I was spot on in my prediction. Kamada, only 2, and both of them were in Serie A. So I'm taking that category. Now here's here's one we can, I don't know, maybe up for debate, maybe not. Best signing. I had Rovella projected as our best signing. You had Kamada. Now, um, I'll just throw out a number here, a rating. I took a look at some of the FOTMob ratings to maybe provide a stat, something a little less bias, to ascribe a winner to this. But FOTMob gave Rovella 7.0 and Kamada a 6.90. So fair to say that between the two, we would go with Rovella.
Yeah, I would love to have seen Kamada over the course of a full season and then reassess, but you know how things went.
Yeah, and look, it was a tale of two seasons. Obviously, a change in managers changed everything for Kamada. He was a very different player than he was under Sadi, and maybe had he seen that performance earlier and throughout the course of the season, it would be different. But I think we're both really, really high on Rovella, so much so that any risk of losing him for me determines everything in the way of who our next manager is. I think Rovella is that important to us. So, whether or not he was the best signing is certainly up for debate. Obviously, there's shouts for Guendouzi. For me, Rovella was the most important signing. I think, but that can be up for debate. Adriano Quara on YouTube comments in Guendouzi. Again, Guendouzi for much of the season, I thought was our best player and could be debated between him and Rovella. Rovella obviously went out and missed some time due to injury, but two very important players for us. Next, we had breakout player. This one we're both just pretty off on. So it's really less about who was closer to being right and more of who was just less wrong. I had Lazzari as my projected breakout player, and Caleb, you had Pellegrini. Now, based on FOTMob ratings, Lazzari performed at a 6.75, Pellegrini at a 6.64. The edge here to Lazzari. Caleb, I'll give you a chance to either agree or disagree.
This is kind of tough. I'm not gonna lie. To be fair to us, initial thoughts, like if you hindsight 2020, right? Like these were really reasonable assumptions. I do think that Pellegrini was a less crazy one, simply because Lazzari is an older player who maybe has sort of a limit of how much better he could have gotten to begin with. Whereas Pellegrini, right, was a younger player. Looked like things were really starting to come together for him for a bit there under Sadi. So I'm gonna have to go with Pellegrini being a little less crazy.
I mean, I see your logic. I think obviously we were going into this and hoping who, right, like it's a breakout, so it's a little bit of who's that unexpected player that came out of nowhere. And if we're being honest, obviously neither one of these were close, right?
Yeah.
Adriano chimes in with Mario Gila, and I think if we're giving that award, right, you're probably looking at a Mario Gila. That's the perfect example, a player that came out, broke out, not expected, and obviously performed really, really well. But between these two, look, I mean, Lazzari was a player that we both thought could do more than he had. Obviously, there are some qualities there. We saw Sadi work some magic by improving some players from the year prior. A player like Patrick, for example.
Yeah.
And thought maybe Lazzari could do the same. Now, I think Lazzari played a whole heck of a lot more than Pellegrini this year, and between his match ratings and just the fact that he was used a little bit more, for me would make it
Oh yeah,
would
I
make
agree.
it so.
I agree with you.
So MVP, we had predicted. I had predicted Romagnoli as the MVP of the season. You had Kamada. A little trend here for you and Kamada and the love affair. Now, look, again, using our FOTMob ratings is just it's not the be all end all, but just to provide some context. Romagnoli a 6.92, Kamada 6.90, like pretty close. But look, for me, you have Romagnoli playing in 29 matches in comparison to Kamada, obviously seldom used for much of the stretch. What I do think, and Romagnoli didn't play as well as the year prior, and you and I have talked about the defense maybe not being as good as the year prior. But interestingly enough, when you look at some of the surface level statistics, it wasn't that bad. We were 5th in the league in goals allowed, and better than the likes of Atalanta, Milan, and Roma, all 3 of which who finished ahead of us.
Yeah.
So defense wasn't our biggest issue, far from it. And we had some players like Gila and obviously Romagnoli, who, though he maybe had a couple more mistakes in him than he did the year prior, we know how important he is as a leader. We saw how Gila was able to step up and play really well. So for that, I think it's obviously fair to give it to Romagnoli between you and I. Thoughts?
Nah, I mean, for sure. I mean, Romagnoli is a better pick there. But yeah, it's same situation. Kamada in general, I was super high on him. I got to make it aware to everybody. I got his shirt on a kit this year. I don't regret it whatsoever. That's a fire shirt.
I forgot about that.
Hey, hit me up 30 years from now when that becomes a really rare kit to have, and I potentially sell it for 5 times the price.
There's a market in Japan.
That's what I was gonna say. Someone in Japan is gonna be wanting that Lazio shirt at some point, and I'm willing to negotiate. But yeah, again, I think Romagnoli did definitely take a bit of a dip this year. I think that also kind of came from being hurt from his partner. Romagnoli several times over the course of the season had to play alongside a different partner, unlike the stability that he had last year. And the defense was like you said, it wasn't our issue. Our issue was absolutely scoring. We just could. I think what was the stat that came out? We scored the last time we scored this. What is the total tally of goals scored this year?
So if we look at the total tally of goals scored, I mean, I've got our goal differential. Let's see here. If we look at, so our goals scored was a whopping 49 goals this season, which was worse than the likes of Napoli, who finished in 10th. Even Cagliari, I mean, looking at Frosinone all the way in 18th place, Frosinone had 44 goals themselves. So we're neck and neck with the team in the relegation.
And I think the stat was something along the lines of like the last time we had scored that little amount of goals. I think it was sometime in. I wish I remember the stat, but it was like a long time ago. The last time you only put up that many goals. So yeah, goal scoring was absolutely our biggest weakness and really what cost us the most.
Yeah, brutal season. In attack. Top 6 predictions, and so far I'm running away with this one, Caleb. And I'll be honest, it doesn't get any better for you.
Oh.
Our top 6 predictions. I had Napoli winning the Scudetto again, and far from happen. I had Napoli, Milan, Juve, Lazio, Inter, and Atalanta. You had Milan, Napoli, Lazio, Inter, Juve, and Atalanta. Again, both of us pretty wrong because it finished with Inter, who we both disrespected, straight up disrespect. If I'm an Inter fan, I'm using the receipts to laugh at us because that was a awful prediction. But obviously, you got none of those correct, and I at least had Milan and Juve in the correct positions.
Hey, at least I had a lot of the teams that did end up making top 6 actually finish top 6. To be fair, I think Napoli's the only one that we maybe both got wrong in terms of just we're completely outside the top 6.
Correct. That is correct. To give us a little bit of credit,
Come on now.
Nobody would have predicted Bologna. So, but again, in terms of tie breaking, I got to give it to myself here. And then our last prediction came by way of us both giving a hot take, a prediction going into the season. And my prediction was that Lazio would make it to the round of 16 in Champions League. Now, I recall us debating whether or not that was that hot of a take. Let's call it a lukewarm take.
Definitely.
But Caleb, no matter how you slice it, yours was bad.
This is actually a hot take.
The highest scoring team in the league. And we just talked about how they were anything but. They weren't even sniffed. We went, your bold prediction, best scoring team in the league, highest scoring team in the league. Well, we were one of the worst. So hats off, Caleb, on going over on these predictions. And as bad as mine were, they were better than yours. So like Lazio season, awful from us. But let's start looking and giving some awards. We want to look at a few of these, and the first two that I want to look at are our player of the season and our bidone of the season. Two awards that we issue out after every single match. We issue out a man of the match and a bidone of the match. Win, lose, or draw, we want to be able to ascribe a winner and a loser, a bidone and a man of the match. And so what I did, Caleb, was I tallied up all of our man of the matches and all of our bidones to issue out this award. I want to do two things here. One, I want you to give me a guess of who you thought we issued the most man of the matches and bidones to. And then we're going to talk about whether or not who ended up winning was who aligns with who you think should. So let's start with our man of the match or our man of the season, right? Mm-hmm. Who do you think tallied up the most man of the match awards on our podcast this season?
Ooh, man, that's tough. Ooh, I think the person that acquired the most man of the match awards this season. Oh my gosh. I'm going to have to go with Alberto.
So Luis Alberto was your guess for most man of the match. Okay.
Even though I don't think that reflects the season, I think.
Okay. So there was actually a tie. There was actually a tie for what I calculated as about 6 man of the match awards. That players were between Felipe Anderson and Ciro Immobile. Now, I find that really, really interesting for a number of reasons. One, we talked about Ciro being our leading goal scorer despite a horrifically low tally, and particularly when you think about who Ciro Immobile is and has been and the expectations of Ciro. still a double-digit goal-scoring season.
Mhm.
I really, when I sit back and I looked at those numbers, I don't know, it gave me a little bit of hope, because that means he obviously scored in some matches, and scored some important goals. While he didn't do so often, he did it enough, to make somewhat of an impact. And obviously he came in and had some impactful matches, more so than other players. Now, again, a really, really bad season for most, of the squad, but I did look at that as a little bit of hope, for a player that, maybe a lot of people are writing off. So, your thoughts, and who would you ascribe as your player of the season?
Yeah, so that is interesting, and unfortunately, I think there's a big asterisk here because I think the fact that Cheeto he had his good moments, not a lot of great ones, and again, some of that was not his fault. It was just it was a bad team overall, and little service. But I will say 4 of those 7 league goals were penalties. And hey, you got to bury them. A goal's a goal. I get that. I, for one, am not personally inspired or motivated or getting good sentiment from that. For me, it's like, oh my goodness, Cheeto, who his standard that he has set has been so high for Lazio, right? This is the standard setter. If you're not up to his level, right? Everyone's comparing them to Cheeto. And if our standard setter is at that, it has these sorts of numbers and he's getting these many awards, for me, it's like, oh my gosh, where's the rest of the team? For me, it's where's the rest
Right.
of the team stand?
But I think we can say, so 2 things. One, when it comes to penalties, what I have always said about Ciro Immobile when it comes to his penalties, for every fan out there that wants to cry about his penalty numbers, and he's had seasons, you remove all the penalties and he was still scoring more goals than everybody else. But the
No
thing
doubt.
about Ciro Immobile pens is that almost every single time he earns his own pen.
Yeah, that is very true.
Right?
Sure.
It's not like he's the captain of the team, celebrating our 50th with balloons. It's not as if he's right, the Luis Alberto, or he's the guy that's getting to step up and take it. No, he is, but most often he's the one in dangerous positions earning those penalties. And the second note, I'll say this, and the reason why it's a little bit hopeful for me is, I think this season is one that we just got to throw away as an absolute disaster. Everybody took a massive step down. This wasn't just, right, when we look at Ciro Immobile, like, oh man, he's old, he's injured. Yeah, maybe, yeah, right? Yes, some of that. But the fact that everybody took a step back and he was still a little bit higher than some, right? And I just hope that this was as bad as like, there's got to be a bounce back. And maybe there's not from him individually, but as a team, right? You got to think, all right, it can't be this bad. Like, we got to, because we saw a little bit of a bounce back with Tudor in that back half of the season. So, my hope is that the service was so bad, the final third was so bad from a lot of pieces around him, he still was able to find something somewhere that if everything else is running, he can be a much more productive player is all. So, for who are you ascribing then, as your?
Yeah, so my player of the season, I think many people would agree. Hard Dozy in the chat does not, but would not. But it's Guendouzi. It's Matteo Guendouzi. Guendouzi was an addition. Guendouzi, when I think of player of the season, that to me means who was the most consistent, who week in and week out we could rely on to show up. We had a lot of players this season that we had no idea what version we were going to get of them. I can name a lot. However, Guendouzi was one of those few players that you knew no matter what game it was, no matter against who it was, he was going to at least play for the badge, at the very least. But I think in many games he did much more than that. He's much more than just an engine. I think he's quite brilliant in many different aspects. And for that reason, my player of the season was Guendouzi.
So mine, maybe it'll come as a bit of a surprise. Maybe not. For a lot of the reasons you just said, And I'm giving my player of the season to Felipe Anderson. And it comes down to what you said, consistency. Who could we count on to play in every single match? Felipe Anderson. In terms of goals and assists, he provided the second most behind Luis Alberto, who, you know, Luis was the definition of inconsistency, and Felipe played all the time, and he gave us consistent effort. He tracked back. He was somebody that was important to Sadi. He was important to Tudor, right? That never changed. When all the players started changing and tactics change and formation change, Felipe Anderson was still there. So he was an important player for us. And for that reason, Felipe Anderson, I'm actually, we talk about all the woes that we had, particularly, in the striker position. And I was really surprised that we never went to Felipe Anderson playing in that false nine role that we saw the year prior, that he obviously proved himself to be a very good goal scorer. And he's a player that could play at the left wing. He could play at the right. He could play wing back. He could play at a striker position. I salute Felipe Anderson for an incredible tenure. When you speak about this club, his name should always be mentioned. He was an important player, and he honored the badge. And very happy that he didn't go to a rival, and he was going back home. And he's a player that I'll support, during the rest of his playing career. So best of luck to Felipe Anderson, and great player for us. So next is Bidone. So go ahead and give me who you think would have been the player who accumulated the most Bidone of the match awards.
You know what? I have two options in my head. The two I have in my head are Alberto, which I know I said man of the matches. That's, again, just a perfect testament to the sort of player he is. He can be a match winner, and he can also be look like just useless at times. Alberto and Casale are my two picks. For maybe they're tied. I don't know.
So, we talk about a dumpster fire of a season a little bit, and Bidone, we had a lot of names, a lot of players that had their days.
Marusic might be a shout too.
So there was a couple players that earned this award multiple times, but one player stood above the rest. Tati Castellano.
Oh, snap!
Tati with five, at least five bidones. Second was a grouping of players who had at least three. You had Kamada, Marusic, and Luis Alberto.
Very interesting.
So you were right with a few of those players, but Tati coming on strong. And look, he was a player. I think when I think of who the bidone of the season was, two names came to mind. I think this Tati one lines up for me pretty accurate, but I think that's probably my bidone of the season between Tati and Casale. Would have probably been mine. So
Tati's your bidone.
I think so. Yeah.
Wow.
I think for a couple reasons. I just think, again, they're so wasteful, and a player that was given a ton of opportunities under both managers. Again, we talk about how important Felipe was, but Felipe, kind of showed gave the manager something back for trusting him, and Tati didn't, and he missed open chances. That affects a side. I thought I came in with, we both did, pretty high rating of him as a player, and I always expect a first season to be a little bit tough, but I thought honestly he could have been a double-digit scorer this season, and far from it, to a point where some of those positives that he brings started to just fade away. And I really question whether he is capable of playing at this level. So, yeah.
I have a question. How many goal contributions did Felipe have this season?
11.
11. And Immobile?
Immobile goal, he had 8.
That's all season.
Yep.
I'm talking about all
In
competitions.
Serie A. In all competitions, I don't know what that was for all competitions.
Okay, Immobile had 7 goal contributions.
Immobile had 8 in Serie A.
Tati had 7.
Mm-hmm.
And that should be Donor of the Year. Someone who has 1 less goal contribution than the leading goal contributor.
No, he wasn't the leading goal contributor. Leading goal contributor. We're talking about goals and assists.
Okay, so I think Felipe probably number 1 then, right? I think with 11.
Luis Alberto had 12 goals and assists.
Wow. Okay. So wow. Very interesting. Alberto had 1. That's interesting. Okay. Yep. I mean, I think that's harsh in my opinion. I certainly think he's been disappointing. But the reason my Bidone of the Year is Casale is because I can't think of a lot of games where someone single-handedly literally costs us 2 points. Tati had his misses and stuff, but I think rarely that was the main reason or the biggest difference in terms of like 3 points or not.
See, but when we think about where this squad ultimately suffered,
yeah, it was scoring
right? Defensively.
That's true.
Top squad, and had we been able to score some goals, less pressure on the defense, and that's what I found interesting because same as you, I went into this thinking, man, Cheeto must have had a ton of bidon. Like certainly wouldn't have expected him to have as many man of the matches. Certainly, but then when you tally it up and then look at things like, wow, defensively we didn't give up as many goals as I thought. And well, where were the problems? Like, yep, you're right. They were an attack. And Casale, look, our next category is most disappointing player. I have Casale as my most disappointing player because I think he's the player that took the biggest step back. Yeah. The year prior, he was part of maybe the best center back pairing, certainly the best Italian center back pairing in this league, and he took a massive step back. So he is who I have as my most disappointing player. But there's a lot of, I think there's a toss up between those two in terms of the bidone, but Tati again.
Real quick. Again, we're talking about goal scoring is our biggest problem. So that means our attackers need to be held to probably a bigger responsibility. However, okay, 1 less goal contribution. So what did Cheeto do so much more of? Because again, he lacking the goals. He missed a ton of chances. Sitters was disappointing. But again, he did also do a lot of work outside of just that. It isn't that like that. It wasn't like a player where the only sort of contribution that he brought was tapping in goals, right? There was a lot of else to his game. And yes, over the course of a season, that's not enough. It's not enough. But that's it. I mean, I'm being because I do think that's really harsh to say he's the absolute worst player when I think that people. They just didn't provide anything whatsoever, some other people. But fair enough. I'll give it to you. Especially when he only has 1 less goal contribution than one of the guys you praised.
Yeah, but look.
It looks like we may have lost Shawn. We'll just see if he can get back in here. We'll just wait on Shawn here. You guys can hang around. You have any questions? Want to chat anything while we in the meantime? Oh, there he is. He's back.
Hey, yeah. Look, I think when we look at some of the matches, right? The beauty about our instant reactions and assigning a bidone, is that a lot of it's like it's not just about the goal or a missed opportunity or statistics. Like we're jumping into this without reading a ton of the stats with
Yeah.
just a lot of it is like raw emotions, feelings, right? The feel of the game to be like, yeah, that player may have scored, but he really didn't. Like, there's plenty of times we didn't give a man of the match to the player that scored the goal, right?
Yeah.
We'd be like, look, this player was the more impactful player. A match
Yeah.
against Celtic where maybe Pedro came up big and scored the goal, I recall not being my man of the match. It being like, look,
Yeah.
Vecino was the player that came and kind of brought it. So, that's where it's like, okay, yeah, they might have been close in goal or statistically with some of the goal contributions, but I mean,
But
right?
you think performance wise, like overall, because we gave a lot of man of the matches to Cheeto because he scored the game winner. I do remember clearly Cheeto in particular was a beneficiary of scoring the sole goal. Like he had some pretty decent performances too, but this was also an instance. This is the opposite case, which is we gave it to him because everyone else was just so mid that when he came in, stepped up for the penalty, shot it.
Yeah, but
man of match.
We're talking about Cheeto coming in and scoring against Bayern, and where did Tati's goals come from? I think all his goals
in Coppa Italia,
in Coppa Italia, but in Serie A, only scored against I think Frosinone were all of his goals.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Right, but so like your goals. If Frosinone just got relegated, so Tati doesn't get to play Frosinone next year, so he's gonna have to score against somebody else.
Right,
he scored against a Serie B, and that's it. So for me, it's
for sure
right a little bit of that. So
my only argument is harsh over the course of an entire season to say he's our worst player. But okay, we'll move on.
There's not a ton of again for me if I'm looking at the players, you're talking about Casale.
He definitely in the bottom.
Marusic, Tati, like
I definitely agree. Tati's probably bottom 5. I would definitely agree with that. But anyways,
who's your most disappointing?
My most disappointing was Tati. I would say, and I mean, it was my initial was Casale. You said you chose Casale, so I'm going to go with Tati simply to have a conversation. Most disappointing was Tati for sure because for me, what I recall, my sort of whole season feeling regarding him is, my goodness, this guy did a lot of work for us, and he was on the end of a lot of great chances. That again, you can't just be a bad player and not get these chances. I remember a lot of games were like, oh my goodness, like Tati's getting chance after chance. That is a skill at the end of the day, right? Cheeto is very much a guy that's a quantity over quality type of player. He's a better finisher than Tati is, but he's very much a guy that gets a lot of goals. Those big, huge seasons he had as a goal scoring threat were because he just was able to create so much danger from his positioning, his work ethic. And I feel that a lot of that we saw with Tati. However, of course, the final touch was lacking. But when you think about, okay, the final touch was lacking, what else was lacking in Tati's game? Like when I'm thinking overall, like, man, there's a lot of things I liked when I saw over him. What made it so disappointing and why he's my most disappointing player this season was that, man, there were so many moments and instances and link up play and moments that he created where it's like, God, he's like right there. If he could just finish these chances, this man has 10 goals this season, no problem. And you can't be a bad player and have those, you know what I'm saying? You can't be terrible all season and can't be the worst player if you're able to generate, that many chances. But for that reason, he's my most disappointing player because some of the performances were great, because that interplay looked great, because those shots came to him, it was like, man, he's doing work. But the last touch was lacking, right? At the end of the day, strikers are very much graded on their goals. And for that reason, Tati was the most disappointing player for me.
Yeah, I think the thing with, I don't think Tati is, you mentioned like not being a bad player. I thought he was a bad striker this year.
That's fair.
Could do other things, but I thought he was a horrific striker. His feel inside of the box, confidence and like being that outlet, being that center. I don't know that I think he lost confidence towards the back half of the year, where I felt like he didn't want to chase a goal, that there was some timidness, that he would rather be that guy making the pass or making a run instead of being the guy that demanded the ball. Yeah. And in more minutes, he created less chances, right? His XG on target was fewer than Ciro Immobile, despite playing more minutes than Ciro this
Mhm.
year. Like,
Mhm.
so Ciro still created more
Uh-huh.
than somebody like Tati,
Well,
and
keep in
that's
mind, a lot of these statistics, like even like a lot of these statistics are skewed by, like this doesn't take in consideration, like a lot of times like shank shots, but also particularly situations that you create for other people, and as well, like there's so many things that don't go in consideration
for
into this.
sure.
And these are the moments where Tati really shined. Again, I think you had it right in the nail, which is he wasn't a good striker, 1,000%. That's it. But because yeah, and and that was a position he came in on. I would love to have seen him playing underneath Cheeto. We talked about it all the time. But no, like I understand, like Tati sure was a bottom player for me as well, and that is true. He did score against Atalanta. I forgot about that goal.
You're frozen on it. Yeah. But
But yeah, no. So yeah, regardless, he was very disappointing considering what I've seen with him at Girona. Um,
yeah,
you
and
know,
look, that doesn't mean I'm writing him off as a player.
yeah,
We've
yeah.
seen players like Felipe Caicedo struggle in his first season, and there's a lot of adjustments, and he needs a lot of refinement when it comes to the striker position, and he has to improve. He's got to get confidence, but I think he's not that smart of a striker in terms of where he needs to be. Um, all things that can improve. He's still a young player, but I think this is the year. But look, even Tudor is pressing for a striker. There's a lack of confidence in Tati, and it's more damning because Cheeto is obviously up there in age. Like we already
Yeah.
knew we were gonna need a striker. So.
Talk talk about Casale. Talk about your pick.
Well,
A little
look, I mean, it's most disappointing. I said it because I thought the year prior he looked. I thought we were going to be fine in center back, like in terms of our starting center back position. I mean, it was Romagnoli and Casale, and it was a no brainer. And Casale was a nightmare. Again, if I'm thinking about the worst player of the season, it's to me a toss up between Tati and Casale. And Casale was the one to me is more disappointing because I thought he
more.
was safe. I thought we saw
Yeah.
what he was.
He was proven
And
in the league
he was
already.
proven, right?
Mhm.
And that's what's so disappointing. And other players were ahead of him. I mean, for crying out loud, Tudor played Marusic at center back instead of Casale, and Casale is a Tudor player. He played with him at Verona,
Yeah.
and we thought that Tudor coming in maybe revitalized Casale, and there was going to be a change, and there just simply wasn't. And this kind of segues into most improved player. Because of an injury to Romagnoli, because of the dip in form from Casale, we saw a player come out of nowhere, a player that had been buried by Sadi, and a player who none of us really knew too much about, other than a little Real Madrid pedigree. And Mario Gila is my most improved player of the season because he was absolutely tremendous. A lot of people can argue he was our player of the season. I don't think he quite played it maybe enough, but I thought spectacular. To me, what my eyes see is somebody with the potential to be one of the best center backs in the league. Don't mince word. Like, we're not saying he's there, but when I see him making the darting runs, I mean, honestly, some of the most technical ability on our squad, we saw a player from the center back position create more than a lot of our midfielders. And
Yeah.
tracking back a center back with the pace to be a left back, a player that I get weary, and I'm cautious because of what we saw from Casale taking that dip, having a good season, then taking a dip. So what I need to see from Mario Gila is a second season to prove he is who he was this season. But for me, my most improved player was going to be Gila.
Yeah, I think Gila really is the only option here. I mean, Gila was easily my locked in. I just can't think of anyone that has taken such a drastic jump as Gila this year, who became such a critical part that we were like, oh man, we're losing Gila, we're screwed. I would argue he reached a level of Romagnoli where it was like, oh my goodness, if we're missing this guy in our starting 11 in the game, the dip is just way too drastic, right? And I would say you have a strong argument for him reaching that level this season. I'm not saying he's as good as Romagnoli because Romagnoli's had a long career already as a very successful center back here in this league. However, Gila got to that level, for Lazio fans this season as that key of a piece to the team's success, and probably a big reason why our defensive record was probably deceptively better than what it was. I mean, I think Gila coming to the side, I believe I would love to see a graph or something to see like goals conceded or expected goals against when Gila started in the lineup and when he wasn't early in the year. I would love to see that difference, to see the actual impact that he had on the team, an actual number given to it, something to quantify it. But yeah, is there anyone else that you can think of that made a big jump this year? I don't think so.
No. Right. I think, I would say like positive jumps because we saw a lot of negative. We saw players take step backs, but maybe Vecino, right? I thought Vecino the year prior, didn't really do anything. I thought Vecino had some matches where we were talking about him being very Milinkovic Savic like. He would find his way into the box. He would score some really important goals. He's a player I thought took a step forward. Outside of that, it was a lot of players taking a step back. I think you could talk about maybe most improved in a similar vein to Gila because we didn't see Gila play, so it wasn't a player that like underperformed and then got better. It was simply a player we didn't see, we didn't know anything about. So in that same vein, you could say Mandas, right? Mandas, a player
that's a great shout,
right?
Really
didn't play, shout. Didn't know too much about. Played against the Roma in the derby and played well, but you saw kind of some shaky moments where it was a young player, and then boom, all of a sudden we've got two incredible goalkeepers and decisions now need to be made. So I think Mandas, I think the players that took a step forward, for me was Mandas, Gila, and I thought Vecino had a better season this year than last. So jumping into a few more before we look to give some ratings out. What was your favorite moment of the season?
I think it may be everyone's favorite moment, which was that initial win against Bayern. And that's tough to beat. That was a really special moment, especially Bayern at this time. This sort of fell off a little bit after that. But at this time, Bayern was kind of riding high. And we were really low. We were like at a pretty big low at this stage of the season. You have one team, Lazio, at a low. You have another one, Bayern, that was riding high. And we come in and get a massive win. No one expected it, probably not even us. I do want to give also a quick shout out to a secondary one that is I'm always thinking about fondly this season. That's the Napoli win, because with that win, I don't know what it was. It was the beginning of the season. We had a really poor start, and that game it felt like, oh, this is the flip we needed. This is the result that we needed to really flip the season. So this is before we really saw a lot of the team. We saw very minimal of Kamada or any of the new players at this point. So there's still a lot of hope and questions going to the rest of the season. So when that match happened and we won it, it was like, oh my goodness, this is it. This is where we turn around.
And that was at the Maradona. That was against the Scudetto reigning champs, who again, in the moment, we didn't know what a dumpster fire they would become.
Right.
It was at that time, it was Kamada's best performance. It was an opportunity that we saw Kamada and Luis Alberto together. Yes. We saw this incredible free-flowing attack that was early enough in the season that got us salivating, got us thinking about all the potential.
Exactly. Yep. And as well, Napoli, I think, had a 3-4 game winning streak up until the point. They started the season undefeated, I believe, winning every match. And so, it was a complete contrasting sides when we faced. And so that was like, man, this is it. This is the moment. So when I think about moments that really stand out to me and give me, warm feelings, that one is definitely up there as well. I just want to give that one a shout.
Yeah. I think for me, it was beating Bayern at home. Massive, obviously, got us dreaming. And then, a moment that I'll never forget. Nobody, in the Biancocelesti family will ever forget it. But Provedel banging home that header against.
Oh,
I mean,
that was a good one.
just chaos. A moment that'll forever be in Lazio lore. I think about we'll dive into our least favorite moment, and I'll kick this one off. For me, my least favorite moment of the season had to be the the miserable, dreaded Mancini scoring to beat us in that final derby, breaking our streak of wins against our fierce rivals. Hate seeing that player do it. Obviously, losing in Tudor's first derby, and really ultimately what kind of was the stomach punch to the collapse, and kind of did us in for any Champions League hopes. What was your least favorite?
Oh man, least favorite moment. I put also the Roma loss. I would say just because of the hope and the build up and our performance, I would say the Champions League loss on the second leg. And I say that because we actually had a really good performance that game. The first half particularly. And the manner in which Bayern scored. The first two goals, they look like FIFA goals.
Right before the half, was it
Right
right before?
it
was
was
after Cheetah missed.
that's
It was
right.
right. It seemed worse in the moment, but if I'm not mistaken, the cross was deflected a little, or there was like a head on it.
No, it deflected the path of Cheeto. That's what happened.
Yeah.
It actually it was able to reach Cheeto because of the header.
Yeah.
No, exactly. Just it was one thing to just get waxed. On this, I fully was kind of ready for that. It was like, man, we might get just smacked the second leg. But the fact that we came out like aggressive, we did not come out fearful. And I don't think Cheetah was the biggest one I could think of, but there were other chances in that first half that we could have done better. We were the better side for a lot of that first half. And the score right before the half, in the manner that we did with some ridiculous deflection. And then they come back right at the start of the second half to score the second. It killed. It's the hope that kills you, right?
Yep.
For that reason, that was just a really, really it was brutal. I know we were both feeling really down for that loss.
No, it was tough. And obviously they left us proud. Because by and large, like it was a solid performance, and they gave us hope. And compared to our last knockout stage defeat to Bayern, this was obviously a good performance, and it's a Bayern team that ended up going deep in this tournament despite their performance in league play. So, what was your biggest surprise, good or bad?
Ooh, my biggest surprise. My biggest surprise was I want to say Sadi. Sadi was my biggest surprise. Honestly, sacking Sadi. What did I think it was for the better? I do.
He wasn't sacked.
Oh, that's right. He resigned. That's right. My bad. That was a big yeah. Yeah, exactly. He wasn't even sacked. He resigned. So first of all, I fully expected to go through the season with Sadi. I didn't expect us to reach second place again. We went through those before, but I didn't expect us to take as far as a dip as we did. I mean, those moments were really low early on with Sadi. I didn't expect those, and for him to basically say like, you know what, I'm not the guy for this. Like, I cannot help this team and resign. I woke up to that tweet and I was shocked. I was so surprised by that. I really do, really do, despite me being vocal about, hey, maybe need to move on from Sadi. I really did wish that it worked out. I wanted Sadi to really be the next Inzaghi, where he would be here, for a good bit of time, really build a project, compete for maybe a Scudetto. I don't know, right? It didn't work out, but that was easily the biggest surprise for me in the season.
Yeah, my big surprise was the attack, and we don't have to spend too much time on it, but obviously it was we knew we kind of in the past gaping holes in the defense, and we'd give up stupid goals, and our attack was at least exciting, and we'd score, and I think we overperformed our XG. the year prior, and so it
Yeah.
kind of came back to reality a bit. And obviously, for so many years, Cheeto glossed over any issues. So it's still unexpected to be that horrendous in the final third, and that was a shock, and that was something obviously that was our undoing, and obviously we talk about Sadi being a part of that, and just unexpected, and it was a bummer, and it was just not fun to watch. So, as we look to the transfers that we brought in, and we looked at a number of players, and I thought part of the big disappointment was that we felt like we had a project, and we felt like we actually had a pretty good transfer market. The likes of Rovella, Guendouzi, Kamada, Isaacson. So, real quick, before we kind of go into an overall season rating, give me your transfer ratings out of 10 for some of these players. Let's start with Rovella. Out of 10.
Out of 10, I was gonna do letter ratings, but I could do out of 10. Let me adjust these then. Okay, Rovella, I will give a 9 out of 10, 9.5 out of 10.
Yeah.
I think it was such a great addition. The price that we got him for was an absolute steal, robbery, really. It's clear the talent. He came in, immediately showed what he can do. Also loves the team, man. I always, every time I see tweets about him, it's about him talking about how much he loves his club, how much he yearns to represent this team, right? It isn't just to play, but even though I think he's a he's fan, right? Mm-hmm. He's really embraced the club, and I feel the way he's approached it isn't a way of, this is just a stepping stone. Let me get here, and then I get to my next move. I feel like he's really embraced the team, and that's something that obviously we as fans love. And the fact that he also performs on the pitch, huge bonus. A lot of potential. So yeah, that's my rating, 9.5 out of 10.
Yeah, I gave him a 10 out of 10 because for me, he's absolutely the profile of the perfect signing. 22 years old. He's Italian. Talk about his attitude, the desire to be at Lazio at the price we got him for, everything from a profile. It's perfect. I mean, that's what you want in a player. You want a player that is, I mean, he was also a proven commodity in Serie A.
Yeah.
He was a player that knew the league, that performed well. He is the perfect profile, and that's why I don't like to say anything is perfect, but that's what you want. That's a perfect signing, right? That's a 10 out of 10. Price, age, he's Italian, doesn't take up, any foreign spots, and it's all there. And he's got the grinta, he fights, you see so much potential. So, for me, an absolutely important player. Let's move on. Guendouzi, and I'll kick it off. I think Guendouzi is an 8 out of 10. Again, it might seem like a maybe not a great number now that I just gave a 10 out of 10 to Rovella, but Guendouzi, I thought he was a fantastic player. Took a little bit of a dip with Tudor, and for me that's something that needs to change because Guendouzi is a critical player. The reason I say, and maybe knock him a couple, he's just a little bit older. He's 25. He's a player that should be dead center in his prime. He's a player that had a little bit of hiccups in his career, some personality issues that have been documented, and obviously found a home under Sadi, and he wanted to play for Sadi. And so I think, for me, Guendouzi, 8 out of 10. So much that lined up, but there was some risks involved, right? There was a lot of risks. I heard from Arsenal fans that liked him and rated him, but were like, he's got some growing up to do. So for me, 8 out of 10. What'd you have?
I have a 9. I think maybe the only thing keeping him from the same score as Rovella is, he won't have that sell-on value. But to get someone, this is someone that has been playing. He's 25, but he's been a pro at the first division level since 2016. 8 years, and he's 25. He's been playing at the first division level for 8 years, 17 years old. And we get him for 13. I think the rumor about is 13 million euros for a French. He just got caught up with the national team as well, right?
Mhm.
A French international, 25 years old, 13 million, has come on and put, and not just, yeah, the attitude problems. I think if he supports the club that he's at, right, if he's in love with the club, if the fans also give him that return, give that same love to him in return, it's clear that he is willing to give it all for the team. The amount of times he's fought for this club, the amount of, you can tell that he fights for the badge. And
Yeah.
so for me to get a French international, 25 years old, complete midfielder, he's great passing ability, great engine on him, great technical ability as well, defensive ability, can put in the tackle. And he's only 25, near perfect. Only reason he's at 9.5 is took a dip on the tutor, which maybe that isn't really his fault, but also that, hey, he probably won't be able to sell on for something like Ravella can. But yeah, a near perfect signing in my opinion. Really, really great.
Yeah, that's
there.
two back-to-back signings that we're obviously praising with really, really elite scores. What'd you have for Kamada?
For Kamada, so this is for me. I'm the biggest Kamada truther out there, and I feel a little better because he proved to people that doubted him, people that were hating on him, what he could actually do, and that was become the metronome of a team. He could really dictate games, and everything can flow through him, as he showed at Frankfurt. So with that said, however, it was a free transfer, big dub. However, for reasons outside of the field, I would have to give it a C, just a C.
So probably what, a 7?
So I would say closer to a 5.
Okay.
About a 5. And I'll say this, this is a weird one because you don't have a whole season full of performances, because Sadi basically just said, yeah, I don't rate you anymore, which hindsight now was like, what were you thinking? The performances he put at the end of the season. But, started out kind of slow, scored against Napoli, looked like things were going to warm up, always in and out of the lineup. And then it comes to the end of the season. Tudor loves this guy, throws him in. There's a belief, push into him, reignites sort of his passion again, his love for the game, shows Lazio fans what he's capable of and why he was the most sought after free agent this past window. However, with the whole shenanigans off the field that we've had him to deal with the agents and stuff, and just the inconsistencies early on with Sadi, the ranking of this deal has to be for me a 5, because, hey, under different circumstances, would have been an excellent signing, would have been a perfect signing. But because of all the other mess surrounding off the field, I would have to give it a 5 out of 10.
Yeah, I gave it a 3 out of 10. A lot of the same reasons. We're talking about a player that didn't fit, didn't fit the system. We can talk about Sadi, but like Sadi was the manager at the time, and it just didn't fit. Obviously, Sadi didn't rate the player, and that makes the player a terrible signing, right? Like if the manager that's there doesn't want that player, and the manager's already there, it doesn't make sense. Secondly, the contract that he was given, right? For this to be a 1-year deal, with so much power to the player to kind of make the decision and to put us in a position now where we lose him for nothing. Now, we didn't invest in a transfer fee, but there was hopes of renewing, and I just thought it was played wrong all the way around. And I saw a player that now under Tudor he changed and he was revitalized, but now Sadi didn't give him all the opportunities for sure, and that's on Sadi. But the times that he did, we talked about Kamada being a player that like seemed disinterested, and I didn't like some of the fight that I didn't see. And now you see a player like, I mean, he didn't care, he didn't want to be here, and he leveraged his way into a contract, and his agent got what he wanted. And so for me, just a little bit of like the result is a player that didn't want to be here and is gone, and it was kind of played wrong by everybody. I just thought it was a really bad signing and a waste of time.
What do you say? Do you think some of that, feeling of just wanting to get out, do you think that came from clearly not being wanted by the manager? Like if your manager clearly doesn't rate you, doesn't give you fair shot, has some sort of bias against you, which Saudi very much did during the spell, even though he did give some chances early on. Where's the incentive to be better, right? Where's the incentive to be
the incentive is, for me, every time you're on the pitch, everything else goes out the window. Like, that's your time.
Yeah,
right?
I agree.
If it doesn't matter if a manager doesn't rate you, if you are on the pitch, the manager rates you enough, and it's your job to prove him wrong otherwise, right?
Yeah.
Because you're not only playing for that manager, but you're playing for another contract, right? You're showcasing yourself to the world, and playing time is so limited and rare for everybody. Like, I have a big issue with you as a player and your mentality, period, if you're going out onto the pitch and just not respecting it, not respecting your teammates enough, flailing your head back and just not showing that fight. Like, that's a player that I want no part of, right? It's easy when the manager loves you and you're getting the playing time, and right, it's easy to be good when everything is good around you. Like, for me, just, good riddance. I think our problem this year came down to personality, and we can talk about tactics and there was problems and all that, but like, we saw a lot of issues. We saw the likes of Luis Alberto, who, as brilliant as he can be, has always been a little bit of a cancer, has always been a little bit selfish. We talked about so many players talking about new contracts and wanting pay raises and wanting, right? Kamada asking for more money.
Apparently he didn't. That's what he literally came out. Japanese publication said, I asked the same money. I just wanted a year contract.
Yeah. Well, again, we don't need a player on a year contract. We don't need to be doing this year to year. That's just not what we need to do. Lazio is horrific at reset. Like, that's just so such a disadvantage for us. Either you want to be here or you don't. And I'm tired of players that don't want to be here. Give me a lesser player that wants to be here and fight and and work hard. So for that, 3 out of 10. I thought, again, waste of a year, waste of Tudor's time, right? Tudor showing all this respect and trying to get this player, and for him to leave, like, it's a bummer. So what do you think of Isaacson?
I gave him Isaacson a 6. And a bit unfortunate with the Tudor addition. I do think Isaacson, he came in around 7.5, about 12 million euros, right? Yeah, about 12 million euros from reading here. That's a lot of money. And he still seems really, really raw. The talent's there, absolutely. And I did love to see some moments from Isaacson. But 12 million for Lazio standards is pretty expensive signing. And you look at the most recent signing that Lazio made, supposedly, according to Fabrizio, but Fabrizio's like terribly inaccurate when it comes to Lazio news. So just take it with a grain of salt. There's a player there that's really excelled at every game here. And I think for his age, he's 22, 23 years old.
I believe he's 22. Let me confirm
that before I say anything else.
Isaacson is 23.
23 years old.
23 in April.
23 years old. Coming to the league, you expect 20. It's still young, don't get me wrong, but 23 years old, I mean, he seems a little bit raw for that age. Looking at other 23-year-olds in Serie A.
Yeah, big jump though in leagues, right? I mean,
I get it. That's what I'm saying. You're making that jump later than most people are nowadays. Back in the day, that's normal. But still, the talent's there. He did get a lot of opportunities too. Unfortunate, but I think for the sort of impact we were looking for, he came up a little bit short. But I still like the signing. I still think he's a guy that's worth keeping around and investing in. And so for that reason, I gave it a 6, where it's a little bit above average, right? I like it.
Yeah, I'm aligned. That was my number, 6 out of 10. I thought, again, there's a lot of hope. There's enough that I saw. Super interesting player. I thought he gave us something that we didn't have, and that was somebody that was willing to take players on. I thought he was the exact type of signing that you want off the bench, coming into Serie A, first season. Again, showed a lack of fear. And there's a lot. I want to see him come back. He's a player that I really, really am excited about. So didn't quite do enough, but that's also because of a change in manager. And I hope he's not completely frozen out, but there was enough there. So real quick before we go to overall season rating, Tati Castellanos. And I'll start because I already gave my 4 out of 10.
Okay.
And even then, I think I might be a little generous. I say 4 out of 10. I gave Kamada my worst score at 3 out of 10. I don't think we wasted our time with Tati, right? I think he's a player that still wants to be here. He's a player that fights. Talk about players that fight. He gives me that. I'm not worried about him fighting. There's a lot there. I'm very, very disappointed in what we saw from him in the striker position in particular. I do think that there's something there that can be productive, but I have a lot more questions. The more I saw him, the more we went into the season. Instead of kind of bouncing back, I thought he just I expected more. Like with his personality, I thought he would fight back a little bit more. So I'm disappointed. It comes with a big fee. I don't know if you have it pulled up. What was the transfer fee on him? Almost 20.
17 million.
Yeah. I mean, look, that's a massive, massive fee for us as a club, and that's what it comes down to for me more than anything. It's a combination of his age and that fee. I mean, we're not talking about a player that is 19, 20. He's 25. You talk about Isaacson being like, whoa, he's kind of like, we're talking about a player that he just came from MLS.
No.
He was owned by NYCFC. He had his time, his one season at Girona.
Top five league.
Isaacson. A little bit easier to score in, right? But just he's 25. The fee is tremendous for us. And that combination with that production, again, I go back and I want to be a little lenient and say, I say, look, Caicedo in his first year, Caicedo we brought on for pennies, right? Like this is a player that is brought on in the fees that we pay. You're supposed to be a star player. And he just fell so far from that again, 4 out of 10, and that's being really, really generous. What'd you have?
You may be surprised. I also have a 4 out of 10.
Wow.
I do. Yeah.
Take it back and give him a 3, a 2.
Yeah. Wait, what? That's a 1.
Hardo's here gives him a -4.
4 as well. And I think it's a 4, and I think you have I think it's a fair rating simply because for me, if you give a 1, a 2, a 3, that's like he has no future at this club. That's like that level. 4 is like, you know what? He was kind of garbage, but hey, there might be something there. And I think it's I think you made the case perfectly, which was a significant fee. He doesn't have the benefit of a doubt of an Isaacson, who was his first season in a top 5 league. Castellanos has already played in a top 5 league, so you don't expect the adaptation period to be as difficult for someone like that. Therefore, you expect them to kind of come in and do especially with the fee, the experience, and some of the history that he's had within MLS as well. And with all those things combined, it's a 4 out of 10 for me. I also don't think it's a complete waste. I do think I'm very curious to see what Tati can do at the full season of Serie A under his belt now and going into the second season. I'm very curious to see that. But yeah, I think 4 out of 10 is very fair for a signing of that caliber.
All right, last 2. Overall season rating. What do you got?
Overall season rating on a 1 to 10?
1 to 10.
I want to go to 6. And I'm going to go that it would have been a 4 if Tudor didn't come in and salvage something at the end there. Because if Tudor had come in and we were just losing a lot, and had nothing to play for, and we're just kind of hanging around in the middle, like low middle tier, then yeah. But I do think that we had some pretty significant moments. We reached the semifinal of Coppa Italia, correct? We had some good performances against Juventus. We had a Champions League win. And despite all the setbacks, despite all the drama, despite managerial changes, we are playing in Europa League, not Conference League. We're playing Europa League. And by the end, we were also had something to root for. And so for that reason, I will give this season a little bit above average. Like it was trending really downward for a while. It would have been a real low 3 or 4, but I do think there are some saving moments in this season that we could grasp onto to say, hey, you know what? It wasn't that bad.
Yeah, I had 6 out of 10 as well. And, there's, I think in a maybe not a normal, there was a lot of chaos. There's a lot of drama, which isn't, anything we're not accustomed to. It's Lazio. We know what we're in for. But, I think just because we had so much hope, again, finishing second, a lot of positivities, good transfer market, and a lot of turbulence, right? One of the worst goal-scoring teams that we've ever seen. challenges, ups and downs, managerial change, as I mentioned. But we finish in Europa, which is where we have to be. That is like the minimum for us, and we accomplished the minimum. And Europe is Europe. We still have teams that it's not an easy feat, and so we were able to do that. But obviously we had hoped for so much more, and thought it was a fine season. Semifinals in Coppa Italia that we get eliminated by Juve, but it's tough. It's at the end. We bounced back from being down 2-goal deficit, and I thought it was we were kind of knocking on the door of potentially winning a trophy there, and obviously we knock out Roma in the Coppa Italia, which is massive, and obviously we talked about round of 16 for Champions League. So there was still enough positives despite some of the chaos. So looking to next season, what's your hype meter? Like how much it's early, and we'll obviously do a podcast and cover all of it, and once we get through some of this transfer market, and we'll cover the transfer market, but just kind of initial, because there's a lot of rumblings out there, and we don't even know who our manager is going to be, and what do you think? What's your kind of hype meter?
My super initial hype meter right now is kind of, I'm at a 4 out of 10 right now. This is absolute chaos right now. This is going to impact signings. This is going to impact players we keep on board, players that may leave. Big decisions have to be made. Will the right ones be made? We don't know. It isn't a 2, because I have seen reports of Lotito and other executives at Lazio who seem to have the priority straight, which is, hey, we believe in these players like Ixaxen, Guendouzi. That's a priority. These guys are critical pieces. The fans love them. They seem to be really prioritizing and believing in the players that they signed, which I think in this case is more warranted than the coach, because at the end of the day, Tudor isn't one of those coaches where like, okay, we need to bend over knee for him, because if we just do what he says, we're going to win titles, And Antonio Conte would be something like that, where you're like, all right, we'll be willing to bend for him because he's proven with the right tools, he can win stuff. It may not be for a long time, but he'll get you something. He'll get you a trophy. And so with that said, it's annoying. I would love to go smoothly into the summer, start planning these targets, get Guendouzi, these sort of borderline players that may or may not leave, get them locked in right at the time, Kamada, right? But it's not. It's actually been really chaotic end to the season with all the off the field crap. So for that reason, I'm not too hyped for next season as of right now.
I'm a 10 out of 10. Buckle up. It's about to be bonkers. It's clown season. I'm here to consume all the drama, all the noise, all the BS. It's a soap opera, man, and I'm excited about it. I'm going to be excited to cover it. Right? We already have knocking on the door our first signing. We're just waiting for Lazio to confirm it, and honestly, I think if it's true, it's a good bit of business, and it's probably the earliest we've ever signed a player. So, a lot to be concerned about, but Lazio's not going to leave us without something to talk about, and without the matches, like this is the content. This is going to be a lot of fun, a lot of chaos. I think, right, stubborn Zio Lotito is going to make sure that he gets what he wants. But as nuts and stubborn as he can be, like that stubbornness also has come in as an advantage, right? Like he's not going to get pushed around to move a Guendouzi or a Rovella because that's what Tudor wants, right?
Yeah.
Like, so that's where I'm like, good. Do not lose those players. A manager will come and go, and so do players. But these are players that want to be here, and I think are important. So, I think there's going to be a lot of intrigue, a lot of chaos. I think for us, getting rid of the nonsense, the players that don't want to be here. We got rid of Kamada. Like we don't have to worry about Felipe as much as I loved him, right? Like it's no more questions of a player on the final year of a contract.
Alberto looks to be on his way out.
Get Luis Alberto out of here, right? Doesn't want to be here. Doesn't want to take another Euro from Lazio. Ciao, arrivederci. Like we'll see you. Appreciate it. Time to move on. And let's just get players that want to be here. So we'll be here to cover it every step of the way. Appreciate everybody for tuning in, listening to this episode. We are on every audio platform. Subscribe, help us grow this channel. We want to do more and more. Let us know in comments. Hit us up on Twitter, Instagram, the TikTok. Let us know what you want to see us do more of and cover. And sempre, forza Lazio.